to look at individual reports, primarily of what I will call edge experiences, near-death experiences, experiences from meditation. So these are first-hand accounts. We're going to look at experimental data coming from the science of relativity, the science of quantum mechanics, and the science of consciousness research. And we're going to be looking at yogic and Buddhist texts, certain portions, certain quotes from these texts. And we're going to put it all together. Last thing, before we take a break, I'm going to take you through what we're going to be examining. There are 8 what I've called common sense views. We'll examine all 8 of them using these sources. Relativity takes away from space and time the last remnant of physical objectivity. Albert Einstein. The ontology of materialism rested upon the illusion that the kind of existence, the direct actuality of the world around us, can be extrapolated into the atomic range. This extrapolation is impossible, however. Werner Heisenberg. Those who are not shocked when they first come across quantum theory cannot possibly have understood it. Niels Bohr. The idea of an objective real world whose smallest parts exist objectively in the same sense as stones or trees exist, independently of whether or not we observe them, is impossible. If thought is only a part of the whole, can it ever contain the whole? David Bohm. It will never be possible by pure reason to arrive at some absolute truth. Werner Heisenberg. The aim of yoga is the intentional stopping of the spontaneous fluctuations of mind. Why? To address the problem described by Professors Bohm and Heisenberg above. That is called yoga, whereby the cycle of birth and death ceases. This requires the utter transcendence of the wavering, unknowing mind, and is achieved in 2 ways, self-knowledge and or the restraint of prana. However, yoga has come to mean only the latter, yet both the methods lead to the same result. To some, self-knowledge through inquiry is difficult. To others, restraining prana is difficult. But my conviction is that the path of inquiry is easy for all, because self-knowledge is the ever-present truth. I shall now describe to you the methods of yoga. Hatha Yoga Pradipika. When mind and prana are absorbed by the object of meditation, the light arises. The Absolute in the form of a radiating light, which is the source of all things, is the highest objective to be reached. There is no higher state that a yogi can expect. Direct your inner gaze upon this light and cross the ocean of becoming. Buddha. There is, monks, an unborn, unbecome, unmade, unfabricated. If there were not that unborn, unbecome, unmade, unfabricated, there would not be the case that emancipation from the born, become, made, fabricated would be discerned. But precisely because there is an unborn, unbecome, unmade, unfabricated, emancipation from the born, become, made, fabricated is discerned. So firstly, the universe is like a room of infinite size with a single clock to time the movement of all material bodies. So when people think about the universe, even whatever that word means, it's kind of like, okay, it just goes on forever, and there's like a clock somewhere, and it starts at some point, and it'll maybe wind down, but it keeps running. And everywhere in this big room, that clock times everything uniformly. That's an assumption. And next, common sense view number 2, material objects are composed of discrete atoms which move in an absolute space and time. So if I were to look at my hand and kind of, divide it, and I'd find cells, then I'd find molecules, then I'd find atoms, and then I could divide atoms and find subatomic particles. And I could keep on doing this and keep finding tinier and tinier little bits floating in an absolute time-space, a noumenal time-space, not a phenomena time-space. The time-space is just there, and you're going to find little bits floating all the time. And at some point, maybe, atomism says, that you'll come to some fundamental atom, and there they are. That's what everything is made of. It's just, that's what it is. It's kind of common sense. We kind of, unless we really examine it, we can come to, even back of the mind, think that's what things are. That's what matter is.
And that's what the physicists are chasing right now. You know, where is that tiniest piece that everything is made from?
And then it goes poof, but it's nothing there.
Right. And it's a very interesting story, exactly what they have to say about what the experiments indicate, and, you know, like, what is it then? What do you call it? How do you think about it? And it sounds a lot like what Buddha said from time to time, actually, and we'll see the parallels. Common sense view number 3, mind is the same as the brain. Mind is located in the body. The reach of mind does not extend to matter out there. The reach of mind is limited to sensory data. The mind exists exclusively in the present and does not extend to what is called past and future. In essence, the reach of mind is the same as the reach of the space-time bound body-brain senses. We're going to examine if there's anything that's indicating that that's kind of a suspect view. Number 4, mind and matter are two distinct things. Mind passively observes an independently existing reality, is what that should read. Mind passively observes an independently existing reality, exists apart from it. Essentially, atoms move around through time and space. That's what mind is looking at. Number 5, self is body. We'll see if there's any reason to doubt that. Number 6, either there is a soul or there is no soul. I mean, is this a yes or no thing? Is this got some premises and assumptions that maybe would even invalidate that as a valid question, perhaps? We're going to examine that. Similarly, either theism or atheism must be true. Is there like a middle way through this, or does this have to be dealt with in a yes or no way? And lastly, the subject-object distinction is a primary, fundamental, permanent feature of perception. You can never get past mind looking at something, that this is just how it is. The subject-object distinction is a primary, fundamental, and permanent mode of awareness or consciousness. The subject-object distinction is a primary, fundamental, permanent feature of reality. These are 3 different ways of saying the same thing. Samadhi, for instance, denies that this is the case. In fact, the subject-object distinction is what is responsible for what's then called a flux. Is there a way to close that divide? Putting it into very personal terms, is it possible to look in the mirror or to think about oneself or to be with oneself, and there is a self-knowledge possible that supersedes the sensory and cognitive modes? It's a knowledge of the thing of itself. It's the knowledge that a thing has of itself. Another way of putting it is, surely reality knows what it is, right? And so what is the experience of reality knowing itself? I am reality, you are reality. Somewhere in there, reality is not foreign to itself. Can that overlap this temporal consciousness that we're walking around with? So that finally there's no mystery left, because there is the knowledge of reality to itself. Not reality as my mind is regarding it right now, but reality to itself. That's the import of the word samadhi. So it's not individual all of a sudden coming to a deep self-knowledge about themselves. Oh, all these memories, all these past lives, that's too small. What's happening is that the individual is reality, and reality knows itself. But here, the yogi partakes of that. So as one of my friends said sometime, that what the yogi is trying to do is he's trying to retain one tiny atom of individualness in his little toe or her little toe, and all the rest of it is reality to itself. There's a tiny little thing that's looking on, and that partaking is known as samadhi. So whatever is going on here, this thing called reality and being, sitting here and talking to each other and so on, it's part of a huge and mysterious process. And that process is not a stranger to itself. And so we can look at this process we're engaged in now as a human being kind of making an effort to kind of get closer to truth and knowledge and end of suffering and agitation and so on, and just quest by the human being. But equally, we can say that even all of that is going on within something unimaginably, I mean, it's unthinkable. And so the process may not even be what we think. And so we will examine all of that over the weekend. Any questions or comments? Because we'll stop now, take a break, and begin with breathing and meditation.